David, how do you pronounce house sound? It's Coholnish.
Oh,
No, that's not.
it's,
No, it's
yeah, I forget, I have to just listen to
Ah,
Bob
right.
say it.
Catch it, isn't it?
That's it.
Isn't it catchy?
Where's Bob's video? It says it enough
It
times.
says it enough times in the video.
I always
A cat song, something like that.
Yeah.
That's it.
What's that?
Somewhere like that.
Something like that.
I don't profess to be perfect in that language. Michael sort of got a little sidetracked. Well, I was going to give you a little chat this afternoon, but
It's okay.
I got
We'll catch up, I expect, during the course on most things on the course of this afternoon.
This silly thing is showing dog red lines under large lines. Is that because it doesn't like the spelling? It should be two words.
That's special first thing.
I'm in the worried, because I'm worried.
Building.
Probably should hide the plastic box.
Presentation, I emailed it, just this last email, I think, I'm pretty sure.
Word doesn't show on track changes and stuff when you open it up and then
Good morning. No, so, I guess they just get some stomach flu or something. She's having a rough time.
Yeah, she-
Much of a
she
holiday
wasn't-
for her.
She wasn't well for,
No. All right, well, we'll call this meeting to order. Welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their month off.
Did we get a month off?
Fish, you guys.
I'm glad to see you all back. So we have a special council meeting Monday, September the 9th. And the approval of the agenda, any late items?
We do have one late item for this meeting, which was the track change version of the building bylaw 489 provided by Daniel by email.
Okay. Hi. Look at that, hop along. Good to see ya. Good. Okay, thank you. And can we have approval of the agenda then, please? Thank you, Rob and, yeah. Public comments? You got anything to say? All right, thank you. And the bylaws, we're gonna move to a committee of the whole, and the recommendations, council move to the committee of the whole, I'll move that. Somebody seconded, David, thank you. And right on to 3.2, which is Daniel Martin, Manager of Planning and Development, re-proposed building bylaw number 498, 2019. We got
the
167
last
pages.
attachment and
167 pages to go through.
No problem.
Yes.
no.
So thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. So just, I'll give you a brief background of the project, and then I wanted to run through just what some of the more significant changes in the proposed building bylaw were, just to sort of guide some discussion. So by way of background, so February of this year, Council directed staff to prepare an amendment to our current building bylaw, which is bylaw number 65. To reflect adoption of the step code. So step code 1 by October 1st of this year and step 3 by October 1st of 2020. And at that same time to draft upgrades to the green building policy to reflect the step code. So way of background, our current building bylaw was adopted in 2002. And it was based on a model bylaw put out by the MIABC, which is the Municipal Insurance Association of British Columbia. So more background, so in between then, the Provincial Building Act was adopted in 2015, and this established the province as the sole authority to set building requirements, so it's technical requirements. Local governments can still set administrative requirements, but so it used to be that the local governments had the authority in their building bylaws to regulate things like, before the step code, environmental issues. You could regulate noise requirements or any sort of requirements within your building bylaw, and local governments no longer have that authority. or so to note, the building code is periodically updated by the province, and the latest update came into effect December of 2018. And the MIABC has periodically released new model building bylaws, so they released this, a later version in the spring of 2018. I'll note on that too, they released them for smaller communities and for cities, and we've always used the smaller community model. So in preparing an amendment bylaw to the building bylaw to include step code requirements, staff, so mainly myself and Greg Cormier, our building inspector, looked at to address some ongoing issues with the current building bylaw and challenges that we've had in enforcing and implementing the building bylaw. So ultimately, as we tried to go through that process of saying, okay, what would we change? We determined instead we're probably better starting with an entirely new building bylaw, and so basing it on the updated model building bylaw rather than trying to craft, somehow merging them together just to start over. So I've characterized some of the changes into clarity and then new requirements and expanded requirements. So in terms of clarity, there's a number of places where our current bylaw 65 will mention a topic and not have any sort of regulations around it and leave it just very open. So for example, in our current bylaw, we take a deposit with a building permit of 1% of the construction language, but there's actually no other reference in the bylaw itself as to what the deposit is for. So we've encountered this before in terms of, can we use the deposit to do certain things? Well, we've no authority to use the deposit. We sort of can use it as a carrot to incentivize people to finish, but in terms of doing corrective work, there's no authority there. So the new bylaw has language that what the deposit is for and when it's returned and when we can use it and when we withhold it and return it. Similarly, so temporary buildings, they're listed as an item in our current building bylaw as something you tick to say you're applying for a temporary permit. There's no actual language in the bylaw about, well, what is a temporary building? How long is temporary? What standards does a temporary building have to apply for? So the new bylaw has a section on that. And again, moving a building, so if you bring a building from another jurisdiction into Bowen Island, so you've bought an old house in the Lower Mainland and you're barging it over to Bowen, well, what standards does it have to do? Again, our current bylaw has an item on a building permit. You tick and say, yes, I'm moving a building, but there's nothing else in it that says, okay, well, what's acceptable and what are we taking in? So the new bylaw has a section that talks about, okay, what you have to do to move a building. In essence, is that a registered professional certifies it substantially complies with the current version of the building code. So again, in our current bylaw, it states that if you want to demolish a building, you need a permit for it. There's again, it's including the application form, and there's a fee listed for it, but it doesn't say, okay, well, what do you actually have to do to get a demolition permit? In our current bylaw, again, it says now, okay, you need to do these couple things that you ensure it's safe and it's done properly, but it's outlined in the bylaw itself. And probably in terms of clarity as well. So if you're changing the occupants, changing the use of a building. So if you built a garage and you want to change it into a secondary suite, or you built a workshop and now you want to do it as an Airbnb, it's a change of use that requires a building permit. And our current bylaw has that requirement, but it's sort of hidden in the middle of another paragraph, and this bylaw separates it out, so it's really clear to say, okay, you're changing the use of a building. That requires a building permit as well as building the building. So in terms of new requirements, well, most obviously our current bylaw has no step code requirements. The new bylaw would have step code requirements, so we just mandate step 1 now and step 3 in October of 2020. Another new requirements, so our current bylaw has no requirements for sanitary facilities, and so the new bylaw has a section where it says sanitary facilities are required on site where a building permit has been issued. And then we actually crafted language around it that says, or it can be in a vicinity of work. So we talked to some contractors and they said, well, sometimes it's the neighboring property can provide it. So okay, that's an acceptable alternative. And then probably more where people would experience differences in our bylaw is more about where we talk about expanded requirements. So when we go through applications, there's an expanded list of what we're requiring on a site plan and requiring a survey of the property. So our current bylaw says that it's required to be a site plan prepared by a BC land surveyor, and the new bylaw would say, well, it's by a registered professional, but you also need to provide a survey of the property to show the whole property. And then expanded requirements again, so in inspections, there's additional inspection points. So it says there's an inspection point following excavation before you start constructing the forms, which is a new inspection point. And there's a new inspection point of vapor barriers and insulation, which we've actually been inspecting. It was a sort of, as the code has changed, is now required, but our bylaw hasn't changed to reflect that point. and letters of assurance. So there's changes in the language around letters of assurance. Letters of assurance are if you have a registered professional doing work and overseeing a component of your building, such as the foundation, the engineer provides the letter of assurance to say, I'm doing this and I'll certify it and take care of it. And so what we've had challenges with it in our current bylaw is implementing timing of it. So people say, well, I'm going to provide letters of assurance, but so you don't need to worry about it. And so this will say, okay, well, before you do that, you need to provide us the letter of assurance, and then we won't worry about it once you've provided the name of that engineer who's doing it. So those were the main points that I had flagged, and then thanks to feedback from Allison and Maureen, I've sent around that revised version this afternoon with the track changes. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on our green building policy. So that was in that same meeting in February. Council directed changes to the green building policy. So our current green building policy is about seeking green building standards at a time of rezoning, and so it's intended to be a guide for council in determining rezoning applications, but also for applicants knowing what council is looking for at time of application, and for staff in terms of directing rezonings. And I note in the report that our adherence to the policy has not been totally consistent, but there are projects out there that have covenants on title as a result of this policy. So I mentioned the Evergreen development has policies in place, or Snow Cove House has policies in place that are requiring green building standards. And our current policy references Built Green Gold and Inner Guide 80 as two standards that we seek as part of a rezoning. So the proposed policy would say instead to seek step 3, which is what when the step code was released, it showed like a cross-reference and said, okay, these are equivalents, and it's saying step 3 is equivalent to a Built Green Gold or Inner Guide 80. And so seeking that compliance for 2019, but then you need to update it again or reconsider again. When we require step 3 on all buildings, you know, it would be logical then to then say, okay, we require step 4 for rezonings. Yeah, but so as part of that, I recommend referring the policy to the Environmental Climate Action Advisory Committee for more discussion about what a green building policy looks like under step code, and under especially sort of requiring in this interim stage in 2019, and then we require it for all buildings at step 3 in 2020. Well, what should the green building policy say at that point? So I think that was the end of my presentation, and I'm open for any questions on maybe on the building bylaw initially, and then we could follow on to the green building policy and answer other questions on that one.
So just on that, so you think we're going to go to step 4? We'll consider step 4. Is there a requirement to be to step 5 by 32 or whatever?
Yeah, I know they've got a timeline, and
Yeah.
I think you're right, 2032 or something like that to get to that point. And I know that initially when the step code had been put out, they said, okay, well, we recommend local governments not go beyond step 3 as a requirement, as a baseline requirement, but you can require more as part of rezonings. So some like the North Shore is requiring, okay, step 4 or step 5, I think is part of a rezoning. Before going, I've been sort of nervous before going to step 4 is like saying that's an additional thing, and I want maybe some more like information. So I'd say, you know, at this point, I put forward the policy saying, okay, these are equivalents of step 3, so it makes sense, maybe. But then knowing if we're going to require everything to be step 3.
Yeah, I think there's quite a change between step 3 and step 4.
Yeah, that's my sense too.
Yeah. So, you know, we can take a look at it then when the time comes. Anybody else?
No, it's the same. My understanding is there's quite a difference between 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah.
So it needs to be looked at, yeah.
Sure, let me go with just one question.
Mm-hmm.
We, outside of your office and the Muni here, has anyone else been privy to these changes that might be coming down? Have they been discussed with anyone in the trades here on the island?
Not in any formal way, no. So as Greg and I were working on it, and people would come in, we would poll people on requirements.
Okay.
And say, oh, we're talking about sanitary facilities, is that an outrageous requirement, or is that, so we're sort of poll testing as we would go, but no, we haven't done any open houses. We are holding a workshop and then an open house on, I think, September 17th or 14th, my mind is, it must be 17th, so next week, as part of the Energy Step Code workshops, and so our intent would be at that same time as well to go over changes to the building bylaw.
So is it advertised as changes to the bylaw?
No.
So you should let people know
Yeah.
you're gonna cover both.
Yeah.
So that brings up, I prefer to just do 2 readings tonight, not 3, because then it's, if there is something that comes up at that workshop, then it's very easy to change it, rather than having to go back. And it also, you know, I think it's only fair to let them have an opportunity to.
Yeah, so with that, so council's direction from the February was to adopt the step code by October 1st, but, you know, in terms of essentially the timing of it would be to get 2 readings tonight and come back for a 3rd reading and any changes September 30th, we would then be looking to adopt October 8th, so delay the step code by a week, or a week and a bit, but you know, I see the attraction of that and having a chance for comment and to reflect on it more as well.
I think it's just better process.
I think that would be probably a better idea. How does everybody feel about that?
Yeah.
Just gives it time to sort of let it, you know,
Agreed.
get through the system as it were.
I think-
Are you planning an actual session with the contractors and that sort of thing, or?
So like I said, we have a step code session
Okay.
scheduled, and so we would piggyback on that. And then
Perfect.
if the council direction is as well is to space it out more, then we would look at doing another open house specifically on the building bylaw. Yeah, so given, if I know that, okay, I'm coming back September 30th, then I'd probably look, you know, the week of UBCM maybe of doing an open house then as well, and then I can bring that for council on the 30th as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Be nice and quiet around here. Maureen?
Just want to confirm, the part 3 and the part 9 of the step code, is most of the residential construction is part 3? Is that correct?
It's part 9.
It's part 9.
Part 3 is the more
Yeah,
complex building.
part 3 is more complex building.
Okay. So it's mandatory step 5 in 2032
Okay. For part 9 buildings.
for part 9
Yeah.
buildings. And part 3 buildings don't go up to step 5.
Right, because they just have a 4. Yeah.
I had mentioned to Daniel that, it references in here that anytime you do any repair work to your house, you require a building permit. And now, that hasn't changed from the old system, has it been? I mean, that's not a
No.
new thing.
Yeah, so the bylaw is the same, and it says, so alteration requires a permit, and alteration, I just try to find my definition here, change, repair, or modification of the construction or arrangement of or use of any building is an alteration. So change, repair, or modification.
So
Now it
if
says to
you're-
the construction of, so,
Yeah.
So if you're taking cedar shakes off and putting new cedar shakes on,
you're probably not at construction, but if you're taking the roof like system apart,
like the trusses and
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
then that's construction.
But a repair could also be, like I talked about, could be redoing your roof or fixing a window that's gone or something like that. So, but it's the same as it always was.
Right.
So I said, that's not a big deal, we'll just carry on as we're doing,
Yeah.
you know, but it was to get clarification so that
Mm.
people understand that if they
Yeah.
do any, like even if they're redoing their deck or something like that, they can't go and throw another 10 feet on the side of it,
Yeah.
sort of thing, you know. That
So
will
I
be-
can
Something
bring,
that's supposed to
at
be-
the 30th, I can talk to the building inspector, and we can get a more definite list, even just for people's awareness in terms of, okay, these are activities that require building permits.
Yeah,
And noting it, it's not changing under this bylaw, but this is what requires a building permit for.
yeah, okay, perfect.
I know some of the logic of requiring permits for like changes to the building envelope, so changing
Yes.
windows, changing roofing is if there's energy requirements in the code now until you build it and say you have to build perfectly to a step code. And then in a year, somebody's like, well, I'm gonna swap out my windows and replace them with single pane windows, but it kind of has defeated the purpose of the step code requirements and the energy requirements. So yeah, it's a trade-off because people don't like getting permits for stuff they feel is just, I'm just fixing a little bit inside or something, and where does it trigger that you need a building permit?
Yeah, there's always gonna be some irregular circumstances there where, you know, it probably isn't needed, but if somebody at least comes in and asks if it's needed,
Yeah.
then you can get clarification. Maureen, did you have some?
Yeah, I like, and I'm seeing the track changes version
Okay.
first time. I like the change that you made from the 24 to the 48 hours notice. I think that that's much more manageable.
Yeah.
And then on page 19, there's sort of an unfinished reference to potable
Mhm.
water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah, I know.
that about?
So that was in discussion with Allison, and then I hadn't made it as a comment, so I didn't catch it before I sent it out as well.
Yeah,
So how will it be revised?
well, I was raising the issue of, they're talking about wanting copies of approvals required
Yeah.
under any enactment relating to health or safety, and then sewage systems and driveway access, but a lot of people are selling a house that has a well and it was already certified and tests done and proving it's potable, so do they have to redo all those tests? Or if you're attached to a surface water system, do you have to show your license that you're able to draw that and that you've got an approved treatment system from the Vancouver Coastal Health? I was really curious as to why the standard bylaw only talked about sewage systems and didn't talk at all about water systems.
I think if I remember correctly, we've had a version of this discussion before, and it was that the water issues were dealt with by Vancouver Coastal Health rather than by the municipality. And I know in having sold my home recently, there are a number of things that have been taken off the purchase agreement related to water because the assumption is that Coastal Health will be taking care of them.
But they don't care if it's a single family, do they?
I don't know, I mean, I'm wondering about the wording here.
Yeah, so I would have, if I'd seen this comment again, I would have removed it.
Yeah,
Um,
so I think it's
And that's how I
something we
assume
need
it,
to
yeah.
maybe-
And because higher up in the, on page 17 of the bylaw, so that's under the building application requirements, and it says that, okay, if it's not attached to a municipal water system, the owner must apply for and obtain approval from municipality and other applicable public authorities for an alternate potable water supply system. So it's, okay, that's what's trying to cover that
Yeah.
question.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing I guess I was wondering about was the quantum of the fee. Like is $75 just for processing the application, that doesn't seem to me to be enough just for base fee. And then on top of that, it's so much per $1,000 of construction value. And construction value, I think there's a reference in the definitions to construction
Yeah.
value. But I was just wondering how that compared to other municipalities. I don't know.
Yeah. I didn't have a comparison, and then part of me was thinking, as I was bringing in a entirely new building bylaw, I didn't want to bring a new base fee structure at the same time.
No.
So I did adjust the fees for things at the tail end of that appendix, which are like registering items in the land title. But I didn't adjust the base application and the base fees.
And then there's that section that limits the fine to $10,000. Now, when we charge double the building permit amount, is that a fine?
Yeah.
I think it's classified as a fee in the bylaw.
Yeah. So we could charge it, the fines under the fining schedule could be up to $10,000.
Yeah, so I mean, the bylaw, and what I've done here, is make the stop work order, like when you do work,
Yeah.
and you get a stop work order, you pay double to a maximum of $10,000, and that's in part the language that was in the standard.
But they use the word fine in the standard. And in our fee schedule, we've got that
As
other
a
line
fee.
right at the end
Yeah,
that says if you had a stop work order, and it's more than
yeah,
30 days, then the building permit fee is basically double the
yeah.
fee. So is that a fine or is that just the permit fee?
You're getting
From
fined.
requiring afterward?
You're getting fined.
Yeah, so when I did the legal review of the bylaw, our lawyer recommended moving that into the section under fees out of the like in penalty section and into the fees section as an additional fee that you have to pay.
But she left that fine section in there.
So it's out of the violation section and into the,
Yeah, what page?
I'm trying to see where it was, and it's now 10.8. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we've been trying to end up with something that, you know, when somebody builds something and moves in without ever having applied for a building permit, we wanted to be able to levy something more than just double the building permit.
So the other thing that's on your agenda today that I actually didn't touch in the presentation is amendments to our bylaw notice bylaw, and that was bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. So it's bylaw 491. and that is a bylaw that would place bylaw notice enforcements for infringing on sections of the building bylaw. So that's the one where essentially we give it's not a ticket, but it functions similarly to a ticket, so it can be for a single offense, then for a second offense, and for consequence offenses. And so I've drafted that and pulled a fair number of the sections out that I thought were appropriate, which would would have that happen. Some of which are based on the model bylaw had like a finding schedule at the end of it under a ticketing scheme, and instead we've done it under a bylaw notice scheme, but the basic thing starts the same. And so I've gone through and pulled things out where it's like failure to so some of that is like construction without a permit, where we could, instead of saying double permit fees, we just say, okay, it's you've started work and you need a permit, and it's some smaller amount that you haven't got your inspection notices, or you've tampered with a stop work notice, you've interfered with building officials' right of entry, you have an unsafe site, you haven't complied with permit conditions, you don't have permits on site, or supporting documents on site, you haven't posted your civic address, you haven't posted your permit. Items like that where, it's unlikely that we would ever actually go to court to seek enforcement of a provision in the building bylaw, but it gives some other measure that we could potentially be doing in terms of, we may not go to court to do this, but we could write you a notice and have a monetary penalty that goes with it.
So going back
Yeah.
to the $10,000 maximum,
Yeah.
which I can't find the section. Can we charge a $10,000 fine plus double? Like if the building permit itself was $12,000,
Yeah.
can we charge $24,000 for the new building permit plus a $10,000 fine? Or are we limited to $12,000 for the new
Right.
building permit plus 10?
I mean, to get a $10,000 fine is a court order, and I would imagine. Yeah, it's like so for us to, the bylaw enforcement notice can only be a $500 notice. So for us to get a $10,000 fine, it would be going to court. And I would imagine if we've given them a double penalty for a double building permit, the court's gonna say, really, how much more are you gonna want?
I guess we didn't think that double the building permit was necessarily an add penalty.
No,
Yeah.
maybe not.
The fire one, Daniel, part 15.
Yes, thank you. That was the other piece I hadn't included in my presentation.
There's a sub-E,
Yeah,
15.1E. You've got to delete towns and put in municipalities.
thank you, yeah.
So can we just change that? And then you've got an F there with nothing
Yeah,
beside it, so I don't know. I think that's
I
probably
think
just,
it's just a space that got added,
that's just
yeah.
probably the computer doing its own thing.
Is that it, Allison?
It's trouble. I'm trying to get into the fees.
Just while you're doing that, Adam, this, as you can see, this is kind of a special meeting. We're dealing with the building code, so I know it's not really super exciting. The actual main council meeting tonight will be at 6:15. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
Some people like watching.
I know. Love your questions.
Okay. Yeah, I think, no, I think it was just, were the fees comparable? So we can still look at the fee schedule, and it's easy to change a
Yeah.
schedule. But,
Gotta start somewhere, I guess.
no. It's more formatting and stuff, and I think that can probably be changed without having to change it again. Okay. So do we need a motion to get a first and second reading and amended? Well, we need to move out of
You wanna read that,
committee.
Allison?
Oh, we gotta move out of committee of the whole first.
So we are going to move then. If anybody has any more questions for Daniel? No, thank you. We're going to reconvene the special council meeting. And manager of planning and development building update report dated August 30, 2019. Is that, are you gonna get into that again, or is it already done?
Do you want, well, the
Sorry.
motions that we've got to talk
Yeah.
about the green building standards, we forgot to do that.
Could I just get some clarity around the draft recommendation?
Mhm.
So we've got first and, it sounds like first and second
Yeah,
reading
right,
now for 489
As
What?
amended.
As amended.
Yeah.
And bylaw 491,
Yeah.
the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. Have we adequately discussed that?
And so I realized that one, yeah, on the agenda, it's like, it's linked, it's within the report itself as at the tail end of the report itself, so it's harder to find on the system.
I guess my only question was, what does everybody else charge to? Because I have no idea what it is.
For the fees itself,
Reasonable numbers,
yeah.
like $250 if you construct, alter, excavate, reconstruct, remove without a building permit.
It says page 69 in the report. And I agree with Councillor Morse, it's hard to
Yeah.
assess this without having something as a comparable.
Okay.
So I'd be prepared to support a first and second reading, but not.
Oh, yeah.
final adoption.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
or should it just be a first reading?
That's what I'm saying, but I mean, I
Do
asked,
second and third.
my question was who externally has seen this, and I think the spirit of this is that we're not taking it to, I think your point on reading through is excellent, let's get some input, and then, you know, changes need to be made, this is relatively straightforward, and we can move ahead. It also gives us a chance to discuss the changes when other people have had a chance to see
Yeah.
it too. I mean, what do other people have to say on it? And this
Yeah, I
is a
mean,
good discussion point.
we may get feedback that these are
Yeah.
way higher than,
Yeah.
where did they come from?
The, sorry, the bylaw 491, like all the
Yeah,
infraction
yeah.
stuff.
Not the infractions, but the numbers.
Me and Greg primarily. Yeah, so there were numbers in the standard bylaw,
Oh, okay.
and then it was sort of tweaking them, so some,
I didn't
Up and
realize
some
this
down.
was- Yeah, right, I forgot about that schedule in the standard file.
yeah. Which doesn't, like, I've changed it because the way our formatting works is we end up with like for a first offense and second offense and penalty and early payment.
Yeah.
So it's not very clean to read. But
Takes it before. So do you want to?
Is that an average? Do you sort of take an average, or what do you use for examples?
Well, the standard bylaw had numbers in it.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They had it as an attachment, so that's part of the standard bylaw, not part of the bylaw enforcement
okay.
bylaw.
And then some of them I probably tweaked in terms of getting, like, the further offenses getting up to a $500, the maximum it can be.
Yeah,
And I've tried to push them up, so by the third offense, we are giving the
We're almost
$500 in
there,
terms
yeah.
of, we're giving somebody 3 notices for whatever they may be, tamper with a stop work notice or something. It's like by the third time, people should know they shouldn't do it.
You would think.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't need the green building standards to be adopted or read at this meeting?
No, because one, it can be done adoption, so I think the earliest we would do it is the same time when we actually adopt the building bylaw. But I would say too, it can lag because it's going to be that guide for council, so we can tell, if applicants come and we tell them, well, council's considering these changes, so you know, we're gonna be asking for you, as you come forward, this is what we're looking for, that's okay too.
So
And
do you
I-
want the referral tonight, or?
I'd like the referral tonight, I mean, I think they don't meet until the October 2nd, so then that's when I'd be going from anyways. But
The referral is to address the step 3 compliance that should come down. So pretty much everything that's in the green building policy at the moment has to do with energy efficiency.
Mhm.
And what I'm wondering about is whether, with referral to the environment and climate action, there's an opportunity to look at things like rainwater catchment and cisterns.
Yeah,
Would that be within scope?
I would certainly think so, yeah.
I mean, it's, it's like to some extent, it's like creep in terms of like currently all our green building standard says is energy stuff, but under their mandate of environment and climate action, it makes sense. It's like this is initial, or to say like, okay, what fits within this policy versus what should we require, or like that conversation, but yeah.
Because we are getting
Yeah.
public feedback that why the heck aren't we requiring new buildings, cisterns and rainwater?
Cisterns, yeah.
Can we require under the building, I mean,
So when this first came up and I asked the Islands Trust, like, what are their requirements? So they have some development permit areas, and it's a really clear development permit area. You can have a development permit area for water conservation.
no,
and so
but
you-
my
Right,
question was.
and then, and then the Galliano's land use bylaw requires cisterns as a zoning requirement.
Yeah, so I mean, remember
Yeah.
in some rezonings, like
Everything.
Evergreen, we required
Yeah.
cisterns as part of that rezoning
Yeah.
and pervious surfaces for driveways.
Yeah.
So, but that was as a rezoning, but if you've already got your lot, there's no
Yeah.
rezoning, you're
Yeah.
just going to apply for a building permit. We can't require cisterns and we can't require pervious surfaces.
But like I said, so Galliano does it in their land use bylaw as a zoning thing to say if you're gonna build a dwelling in this zone, you need a cistern of a certain size. I'm like, I would want a lengthy legal opinion before saying we can do that in a zoning bylaw, but we can clearly do it as a development permit area.
So if
And-
the island were to be a DPA for water conservation, given some of the things going
Yeah.
on? Okay.
We could do that, we could declare,
The whole island
The whole
probably,
island.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, the island's trust under the policy statement requires Bowen Island to be self-sufficient in water, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't pipe it over the main, that's what that means.
It's going to be-
Yeah, I
That's
understand.
definitely something we should pursue, whether we want to do that right now or
Yeah.
as an addendum a little bit later. I think that's the way we got to go on this, there's no question. Given the current circumstances.
Thank you.
So I think we should split this recommendation. Everybody okay with that? Or do you want to just do it all in one?
Well, I don't think we can't do it all in one, yeah? Oh, then okay?
No, yeah, first and second for both
Yeah.
bylaws.
So the bylaw number 489/2019, as cited as Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw number 489/2019, be read a first and second time as amended. That bylaw 491/2019, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 196/2008, amended bylaw number 491/2019, be read a first and second time. And that council refer the proposed revised green building standards for residential rezoning policy number 01-07 to the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee for comment and recommendations, or just for comment?
Comment, so it's fine.
Okay. Period.
So-
David, okay, second Maureen, thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that's unanimous. All right, now business, we're gonna move to a closed council meeting. Now, we're gonna have to kick you out. We're not. Yeah. If you do wanna come back, but I know you're hobbling around there and you're probably not getting the most comfortable place in the world, or just sit outside for about 15 minutes while we get this cleared up. Your choice.
I may come back in a bit, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how things shake down. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Hmm?